he's not replying.
Hey, Matt,
Yeah.
could I borrow a piece of paper, please?
Yeah. We'll come back.
I left the house late.
Hi, Mike, thanks for coming.
There you go.
Thank you so much.
What's Sal's last name?
Petropalo.
What?
Petropalo.
Oh, gee.
Look, if anybody wants to sit next to Matt, I can go around that side. I just took my normal seat.
So I'm an advocate for getting meetings started on time. We have a few people here. We have Matt Horn is here. I'm here. Doug Finch is here. Sarah Reynolds and Sal Petropalo. They're all here. And Habitat for Humanity is here. And of course, our two special guests, Ryan Wallace and Mike Manikowski. I just want to preface this with how overwhelming the subject of affordable housing and low-income housing is. It is absolutely amazing, and no wonder people don't get into it, because there is so much information and so many paths to take to form a strategy that it almost seems impossible to begin with. So Ryan is here to talk to us about a project and a vision that he has that involves net zero energy and the solar factory in Geneva. I've been to see both the solar village in Geneva, and I also went out to the apartment complex that he's building on Carter Road. And it's an intriguing idea, and I'm going to just turn it over to you, Ryan, and have you share with us your vision.
Well, thank you, Karen, and thanks for really spearheading this. It can be an overwhelming issue, and first of all, can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Right. It can be overwhelming, and there are a lot of factors at play, both positive and negative. I think that our philosophy, and that's not to say it's the only philosophy, but our philosophy is that if you streamline the process, and I don't mean just approvals, I mean the construction process, the design process, reduce soft costs, reduce the time from plan to occupancy. If you can streamline those things, you can get a volume of units to the market that reduces the pressure on, well, frankly, on society, but also reduces the pressure on groups such as yourself to try to, get grant funding, to get the low-income housing tax credits, to get the HCR funds. I mean, all of these things are tremendous pressure points because there's a limited amount of grants, limited amount of opportunities, and yet there is so much need. And so our approach is let's call it a kinder capitalism or a kinder market-based approach, where we believe in obviously being a profitable company, but our goal is to deploy as many high-quality, affordable housing units as possible. Now, projects is an absolutely failed approach. The idea of consolidating people by income and just putting up massive high rises or massive sprawling complexes of people of one income type, I think I think it's safe to say it's a failed model. In reality, society works best when it's highly integrated. And frankly, that there's consumer choice. Consumer choice drives better products, it drives better services, and it pushes the suppliers to be better at what they do. And so what we're trying to do is a market-based approach to affordable housing that, yes, it does require help. Construction has only gotten more expensive, especially during the pandemic. Even though lumber has come down, that hasn't actually reached us yet. We're still paying lumber prices as if it was mid-pandemic. And so construction is expensive. However, the state has recognized this in many ways. And so now you're starting to see new products, specifically the Green Perm loan, which is a new permanent, both a construction and a permanent loan product that is only for sustainable, affordable housing. That is really being spearheaded by Community Preservation Corporation, and they are in many ways driving us. You know, I get to be the face that you unfortunately have to see, but really the people behind me are is the folks at Community Preservation Corporation. A quick background on them, and then I'll start my slides here. They were formed in 1974 by John Rockefeller as a community-based financial institution to promote affordable housing and just frankly at the time stabilize housing in New York City. Last year they originated $1 billion in loans. And yet they are a not-for-profit financial institution, so they are not regulated in the same way banks are. So they have a lot more flexibility. They are investing in our factory operation in addition to providing this construction and permanent project financing. And so I'll get more into that just in a minute here. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen if that's okay. If someone can give me rights to do so. I probably should have asked for that earlier. So that's something that you all can do. It's not gonna let me. Sorry. Do you know who set up the call? Is it possible to allow me to share my screen?
You should be able to share now.
Oh, I'm sorry. I couldn't hear you there. I make sure I wasn't muted.
We were muted.
All right. So, oops, let me make sure I'm getting the right screen here. Yeah. So just a quick background on us. You know, we're a developer and a modular manufacturer. We did the Lake Tunnel Solar Village. Our product is net zero modular multifamily housing. We are a majority women and minority owned company. We currently do our own civil work in addition to manufacturing the housing, which as Karen mentioned, you know, we do currently out of our little factory over in the industrial park. Rather than just talk about us, making this about us, I really want to kind of give you some of our experience so you can understand kind of some of the challenges and opportunities of affordable housing. One of the big opportunities is modular construction. The modular industry has absolutely failed affordable housing for the past 20 years because it became an industry focused on being able to do anything that you could do stick built. And the truth of the matter is it should never have done that. It's the way it happened, but you can't build just anything modularly and have the efficiencies of modular. So to give you an example, the image you see here is a 3-bay crib building volumetric factory. And all that means is that you're building the homes on cribs. They're not going through an assembly line. So that's not quite as efficient. But you're building them volumetrically, meaning that you're building boxes. Modular can also mean building just the wall panels. So it's important to have distinction between the two. When you do volumetric modular, which is what this is, you can see there we're doing siding, we're doing windows, we're doing roofing, we're doing the solar, we're doing the heating systems, the heat pumps, we're doing kitchens, floorings, bathrooms, even appliances that can all be set in the factory. You're not doing any of that work on site. What that also means is that you're capturing the margins of all those subcontractors. And the fact is, even if you're a site-built contractor, you can't necessarily get all the subcontractors you need right now. So it's not as if you're stealing from local businesses who would otherwise get the work. In most cases, we can't find subcontractors to do that work, so we have to do it in-house. And so that actually, even though we're building this currently in not the most efficient manner, in that it's not an assembly line, we still built the homes at Lake Tunnel Solar Village for an average construction cost of $167 per square foot. And that is pre-pandemic material costs. We've updated that number recently, that post-pandemic material costs about $187 per square foot. That's remarkable. So that's the structures themselves and the foundations. That does not include the civil work to make the development happen. But that's $187 a square foot. That was our hard cost to build a completely net zero building or buildings. Now, real quick, primer, what's a net zero building? Net zero building is not a home that's off the grid. It's a building that is still connected to the grid, but produces as much or more energy than it uses on an annual basis. So there's no natural gas in the last development that we did. It's just electric, and the solar that you see there on the roofs produces more energy than the entire development needs. In fact, it produced 130% more than what the development used in 2020. So as you drive down 5 and 20 and you see those buildings, you say, okay, are you looking to do more of those? Unfortunately, the answer is no. Single family for sale development, we found to be extremely cost ineffective. And what I mean by that is, we got a $1.25 million DRI grant for that development, and 1.5 million of it went into the ground. That was extending municipal water, extending municipal sewer, and putting in DEC regulated storm ponds and bioretention. So that is something that, when by the very nature of doing fee simple real estate sales, single family homes, all of those things are required. You can't run private service to multiple homes. You have to do subdivision. You have that additional legal and civil engineering cost to do that. And you also have to manage, in this case, 18 separate projects with 18 separate draw schedules. That can be challenging even for a very established housing authority or housing not-for-profit or small developer, unless you're, some big tract builder that's set up to build 100 homes, and frankly, just run those through a process. You're going to have, it can be challenging. And for us, we estimate that in that development, doing fee simple sales, so single family home sales, added $1 million to $1.2 million to our timeline and administrative overhead to versus doing the same square footage as multifamily. So as a function of the entire development, that's $50 a square foot adder. So it's not that single family homes impossible, but it is increasingly challenging in today's environment. I'll get to an option here in a moment if we have time on how we think that can still be doable as single family. But unfortunately, it's not the way that we did it at Lake Tunnel. And again, big part of that is civil work. Again, $1.5 million going into the ground, and that's with us doing all the civil work ourselves. It would have been more than that had we subcontracted that. and again, those just learning curve stuff, if that development, if that project had been an acre that was a rectangular shape along an existing city street, $1 million of that civil development gone, just not even needed. We're looking at a site right now on Middle Street in the city of Geneva, and we can do more square footage, more units than we did at Lake Tunnel. And our civil costs, instead of being $1.5 million, is going to be $75,000. So site selection, big deal. Not that we don't love Lake Tunnel. We love Lake Tunnel. We love the site. It's wonderful. It was a good development for Geneva. It's $5 million on the tax rolls. That wasn't there before. So what's the alternative? Well, we are pushing very hard on a 3-story multifamily concept. This is I shouldn't say concept. We've got these under construction right now. This is a 25 unit, 22,000 square foot building. And by comparison, if we had done this at Lake Tunnel, we could have done 2 of these buildings, basically had 3 times the density of that lot, and still eliminated at least $750,000 from the civil budget just because we weren't doing subdivision. When you do a single multifamily building on one lot, it's under an acre disturbance. You're not getting into large allocations for DEC stormwater runoff. Doesn't mean you shouldn't, that the municipality isn't going to require some stormwater management for the parking areas, but you're not looking at some of the really intensive stormwater systems. Furthermore, like I said, if you're adjacent to an existing municipal road with municipal access to utilities, then you're making a very, very easy connection for civil. As you all may have learned, it's very good to get a letter from everyone involved, every single party who touches that municipal system, that there is indeed capacity, and that is certainly a checklist item that we've learned, and it's great. I mean, the city of Geneva did have an issue there, and they were quickly addressing it to open that up. It is something that would be our first question on looking at any sites in Canada where else there's just making sure again that there's not just generally wastewater management capacity, but that there's capacity in any pump stations along that line. And that's just a matter of having a conversation early on with DPW. Just some more on this building. Footprint you need for this building is depending on parking requirement, is anywhere from an acre to 0.7 acres. I'm sorry, from half an acre to 0.7 acres. The area that's needed for the building footprint and its immediate kind of outdoor areas is 175 foot by 75 foot. And we've specifically designed it to fit on a large number of infill lots throughout the region. Now, right now, we're a bit of kind of the Henry Ford model, where you can have any building you want from us as long as it's this building. We are looking at one other option that would be a 2-story row house option for perhaps smaller lots, or even, and this is what I was kind of alluding to earlier, even having those row houses available as detached single family. However, the one thing I'll say is that, again, we're very market-based. We're driven by input from the market, and the leads that we get. So for our Geneva development, which has 75 units under construction, we have 300 people on that wait list. A vast majority, about 70% of them, fall into 2 categories: downsizing retirees or younger single millennials. This is not necessarily a solution for that middle group, frankly, people my age with 2 kids. It's not to say it's impossible housing for that. It's certainly very viable. There's 2-bedroom units, 1,000 square foot in here. And frankly, as a stepping stone housing for a few years, I think it's phenomenal for a family because our rents start at 50% AMI. So you're talking about, in some cases, $1,050 a month for a 2-bedroom, but that's inclusive of all utilities and internet. So that's comparable to $750 a month of traditional rent, which is not bad for a 2-bedroom. But key to this is that it's mixed income. So half of these units, especially the end units here, are market rate units, and why it's so important to select sites that, you're not just saying, oh, well, that's an okay site for affordable housing. Is it an attractive site in general for the humans living there? So if it's infill in the city and you can walk to Main Street, you can go to restaurants and entertainment, it will be attractive to market rate tenants who are willing to pay $2,000 a month for a 2-bedroom, when it's a 1 bill setting and it's new construction and frankly that it's high quality finishes. So this is interior finishes from our units at Lake Tunnel. Other than the reclaimed wood accent walls, everything you see here is a standard in our apartments. So the recessed lighting, European style cabinetry, quartz countertops, LVP flooring, triple pane windows, cabinet depth refrigerator, brushed nickel finishes, all of that standard, like in our particular pricing. And so this idea of affordable housing needing to be carpet and paint grade everything and cheap appliances, it does not have to be, and we can do that because we are capturing multiple layers in that process, multiple subcontractor margins, and we're getting a fairly low cost of money through the green perm. So we put some of that money back into the quality of the building. So what we in particular have to offer is the building. So generally speaking, 25 units, 22,000 square feet, $5 million cost delivered and installed. So we build them modularly, ship them to site, and then our set contractor would install it. Our crews would come in and button up the building, get you to occupancy. That's about $225 a square foot. That actually has budget for a typical spread footer foundation included. So that does include that site work. What it does not include is spending $1.8 or $1.5 million on civil work to get the lot build ready, which we think is why there's so much opportunity for infill, even if it's just one building. And so the opportunity here is not just that we can offer this. We're not just sitting here saying, hey, we're selling our wares, come buy our buildings. We are providing the built-in NYSERDA grants into this building. So of this $5 million building, 10% of it is paid for by NYSERDA grants. And these are what I call procedural grants. So that is the incentives that we get for the solar on the roof, the heat pump systems, and the building envelope. Those are applied for by us. Those are well-funded programs where literally we log in, we upload the building details. Once we have occupancy, we upload our supporting documents. We get paid by NYSERDA within 2 weeks. So that comes basically right off the building cost. But CPC and New York Green Bank allow that to be counted as equity. So we count that in the capital stack. So the Green Bank and the Green Perm provides 85% financing. So now you're looking for, instead of 15%, you're looking for 5% equity in the project to do this. And that equity can come in the form of land. It can come in the form of a local developer. And we're also working with CPC and for it to possibly come in the form of CPC, which has an equity division separate from their lending, to actually put in equity into these projects. Because again, their initiative is to do more affordable housing. So there is a potential here that we've got all the financing spoken for on almost as many buildings as you all can locate for us. Obviously, there's growth to this. We still have to expand the factory. It's not that we're going to be able to do these overnight, but they have told us to get out there and start identifying sites. The other 5% can also come from local developers or housing authorities who are either contributing the land or who are actually putting in cash equity. You know, again, we're agnostic about that. We just want to work with community-minded organizations, whether it be a not-for-profit or a developer. And I'll stop talking there, or else I'll keep going.
Wow. Anybody have questions?
I do.
Go
Just,
for it.
Ryan, I'm not that familiar with solar roofs and things like that, but I do own property where I do have some experience with flat roofs. How do you address issues such as snow and other types of buildup on these things?
So, you know, the key thing to know is that there's solar on the roof, but the roof system itself is a very typical 30-year warranted like Firestone system. So, I mean, it's no different than the millions and millions and millions of square foot of commercial roof that is already in our region. So that is very much the same. It is not a fully flat roof. It is a positive pitch. So it's tough to tell here from the drawings, but about midpoint, you are pitching at about 1/4 on 12 in each direction. So it's not a fully flat roof. And in fact, if we can make it work engineering wise, we may transition to a metal standing seam, a 3-inch standing seam roof under that, just again, to reduce that long-term maintenance cost. The solar is on top of that, and it's engineered just as part of the roof system. So it actually stands up a couple inches above that roofing system, and it's, you know, fully engineered to handle the snow loads. And in fact, because the building is modular, you know, you might build this building typically where the exterior walls were the bearing walls and you had trusses spanning that distance. That would be the typical way to build this building. Because it's modular, if you see these separators between the balconies on the rear,
Yes.
that is a bearing wall that goes through the building because each of those is a box. So your roof system is actually only spanning 14.5 feet between those. So your longest span in the entire building is 14.5 feet. So what that comes down to is that these buildings are actually rated for as much as 80 pounds per square foot of snow, whereas code is, you know, 40. And we do believe, frankly, in designing for the future that we're just going to get heavier, wetter snows. We put a 50,000 watt solar array on top of New Energy Works in Farmington, and the engineers designed that for 40 pounds per square foot. Everyone was happy with it, signed off. We got that snowfall that same season where their other building collapsed in Shortsville. And we said, you know, let's go look and see how much snow is actually on the other building that's sitting on those solar panels. And our calculations were that it was 60 pounds per square foot that was actually sitting on that roof. Now, it was within the safety factors of the building, and there was no real risk there, but it was eye-opening to us that code is absolutely insufficient for snow load, 100%. We are getting heavier, wetter snows, and when you get 3 feet of snow, wet snow sitting on that roof, you're going to blow past 40 pounds per square foot. So the short answer is, you know, we feel mainly because of the modular construction process and those engineering numbers that we're well and you know, we well exceed those needs. And frankly, you know, 14.5 foot span distance is just fantastic. Now, on the solar production, that building's not going to produce any energy in the month of January if it's covered in snow. It's just not. And that's why it's so important to have net metering, because we will produce 80% of our annual energy from March to September. And it's like, you know, frankly, the winter months are almost gimme months. And so that's just the nature of sunshine in upstate New York.
I can attest to the New Energy Works one because I was the one that worked that claim on the building that caved in.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And we were on the new building, but it's still.
No, I was the CFO when that happened, so I understand.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah.
You might have remembered we came out and shoveled that roof.
Yeah, I do. I do remember.
Yeah.
Brian, Doug Finch here, the town manager. So I guess what I'm hearing you say is ideally, developers such as yourself that's interested in doing affordable housing is looking for a municipality that maybe would do an analysis of their water sewer, maybe like a water master plan, a sewer master plan. They've already identified any capacity limits and maybe address those, as well as maybe change their zoning to allow for the type of units that you're proposing so that it streamlines the approval process.
100%. I mean, I'll tell you right now, you know, we always get into this kind of touchy debate where are we asking municipalities to do something special for us, a private company, right? And my answer is that it really depends on what the goals of the town and the city are in terms of housing. If you've got a prescribed need and a certain number of units you need to do, what you just described there is hugely, hugely beneficial. And frankly, is developer agnostic, you know, that benefits anyone who is looking to develop. I will take it one step forward and say that while we're the only developers around who are, you know, I don't want to say the only developers, we're one of the few developers so really focused on solar. There is one other element there, is that you unfortunately can't connect a building with this much solar to just any location on the circuit. And that's an analysis that has to be done by going on to NYSEG's distributed generation map. And that map will actually tell you if you can connect the building there. I'm not saying that's something the town needs to do, but it is just something that as you get projects, let's say a developer comes to you and says, hey, we have an HCR project. They're telling us to do solar. We'd love to locate it at X location in the town. A great question for you to ask them is, have you checked the NYSEG distributed generation or the RG&E distributed?
So Ryan, this is Brenda Spratt from Family Promise. So when you build these buildings, do you then manage the buildings, or do you have a management company that manages them?
So we are capable of managing the buildings. That is really up to, so let's say we work with a housing authority that intends to manage them. We can fully handle them. That's fine. The advantage of having us involved in the management is that one, we know the building very, very well. So from a maintenance standpoint, you know, our crews are perhaps a little more adept and efficient at managing them. The second thing is that we are working on an app that will deploy in about a year that will let tenants control the temperature in their unit, see how much energy they're using, see how much water they're using, and see where they fall compared to everyone else in the development. That app is available even if someone else manages the property, but the added value of having us involved in that case is that then they could, in that same app, which they're using a lot, hopefully, to, you know, control their unit, they can make maintenance requests, they can pay their rent, you know, they can see what events are happening in the community. So that is a small added feature. And the only reason I bring that up is that is the only feature unique to us. The building design, the factory design, our factory process is public domain. And that's because we're receiving support from NYSERDA and ESD, and it's actually one of the conditions of our relationship with Community Preservation Corporation. So don't think that we're out here even just saying, you gotta buy from us or you gotta do it this way. If a developer wants to come in and sees this kind of development happening in Ontario County and wants to do the same thing, they can literally steal our playbook. And that's encouraged. I mean, we want more of these buildings to be out there, and frankly, we've traded state support in order to be open book like that. So,
Right. So the other question I have is for the portion of the units that are going to be 50% AMI units, has it been your practice to accept Section 8 for those, or housing vouchers for those, or emergency rental assistance subsidies for the people who live in them?
so we don't have, so far, no. We've been, we have not been accepting that. That's not to be exclusive. It's just that in the two developments that we're working on, they just happen to not be set up for that. They haven't been structured that way. There's absolutely nothing unique to the building or the financing mechanism that would preclude that.
Anybody else?
Brian, can I add another question? You mentioned a $50 a square foot add-on for price basically for single family site development. And I think what I heard you describe today is it's definitely, and obviously it's more affordable for the developer, but it seems like there's a desire from a lot of communities and the two age groups that you particularly referenced, the 55 plus and then the younger generation, to maybe live in a multi-family style development. But what would you say to people that say we need more single family homes that are affordable? I mean, what's your experience on that?
You're muted.
You're
muted.
I think, right?
We started with that method. We tried to build unsubsidized market rate, or not market rate, but unsubsidized affordable housing. We listed our first homes at 150,000, and of course they were snapped up immediately. And then we realized it cost us 167,000 to build them. So that was perhaps an unsustainable business model. In all seriousness, though, you can build single family homes, 1,000 square feet, 1,200 square feet, keep it under 200,000 of cost. Now, to keep it, to have profit margin in there for the developer and the GC, you're definitely going to be around, the mid 200s. And, I don't feel like, depending on the home, I'm not sure you'd consider that affordable, and depending on the area. I think that $50 per square foot number doesn't have to be that. But I will say that because construction costs have increased, and because the regulation, the DOH regulation around subdivision and the logistical process of subdivision approval is onerous, I think your best bet for anything under 200 or even around 200 is going to be row homes. And the only issue we see there is there enough demand for a 2 or 3 story home, with no separation from your neighbor? You've got a front yard, you've got a backyard, you've got hopefully, adjacent parking, or, a garage, ideally some of the things we've designed, it's, you've got a garage off a back alley. That's a very popular model. I really think that is maybe not the only way, but it's probably one of the only ways of building fee simple homes at or around 200,000 that are of reasonable quality. Um, I'm not saying you couldn't do better by really, cutting the corners on energy efficiency, durability. But then, you start asking, are you really putting people in a good situation by buying a quote affordable home that has to be re-roofed in 10 years, re-sided in 10 years, carpet replaced in 10 years? Those are things that once you factor those in, I'm not sure you're staying in that affordable realm early on. Again, I don't want to be overly pessimistic. I'm not saying it can't be done. I would be strongly recommending that if you're going to go for affordable housing, that they look at a row house model.
Hey, Ryan, some of the focus of or a good chunk of the focus of this committee has been looking at home ownership opportunities, but we're starting to see single family rental opportunity. Right? So a single family rental opportunity with the form-based code allowances, where you can put multiple structures on a single site, where you don't have the subdivision costs, you have a reduced civil cost. Does that start to chip away at it? If you were...
And it fills a real life need. My mother lives, on the same property as us, and it's phenomenal. She might not always feel that way, but it's phenomenal. It's built-in babysitting. It absolutely does chip away at that. But again, I still think that in terms of new development, you're still going to be looking at how to condense those properties, smaller lots, more density per acreage. No one, and I mean no one, coming into our offices, even if they've got a family of 5, is looking for a quarter acre to mow. And I think it's not to say there aren't people out there who still enjoy that, but it's something we've seen come out of maybe this downsizing retiree group, but it feels like everyone's asking us for, even on the single family arrangements, if we'll just take care of everything, exterior of the home.
Uptown who said to me he has a list right now of individuals that are 55 plus that are looking for 1-bedroom apartments with little to no maintenance.
There you go.
Very
Yeah.
low maintenance lifestyles.
So, did have Mike Manikowski on there. Mike, are you still there?
Yeah, oh yeah, I always enjoy listening to Ryan.
I know you know Ryan. Can you add anything to what he has given us? And
Ryan really has far better grasp of this than really anybody I know of. I can tell the people in the town that the County Industrial Development Agency is squarely behind the development of the multifamily project off Carter Road and various adjustments that are going on with that. As frankly, looking at it from our standpoint, is workforce housing. Those of you who don't know, I know Matt knows this very well, but the location that Ryan has chosen is proximate to the healthcare institution, proximate to the schools, all within easy walking distance where thousands of people are employed. So it fits very well when we think about what can we do to help the workforce, to maintain the workforce, to give them choices, to give them easy access to the workplace in a very economical, uniform development that doesn't require hardly any maintenance on their part. And just the other thing, Karen, affordable housing, housing strata across all sectors is very important in economic development because really our biggest challenge in economic development is workforce. It's acquiring, maintaining, growing, training the workforce. Ontario County is kind of unique amongst upstate New York counties, as you may have noticed. Just came out in the journal yesterday that the final population census estimates show that between 2010 and 2020, unlike most other New York counties, upstate counties, excuse me, Ontario County matched the state percentage growth of 4.5%, which was remarkable because that includes the New York City area and some of the really high growth areas of the state. So we have opportunity that other counties don't have. They're losing populations dramatically. And we need, though, to serve those populations and enable them to participate in the workforce. That's about all I have to say, Karen. Certainly happy to take any questions from your committee about how the county economic development office views this. Happy to do it.
Anybody?
Great. No.
Thank you, Mike. We appreciate you coming on and supporting our efforts. Anyone else have questions for Ryan? Ryan, thank you so much. That was a really, really compelling presentation that you gave. And I personally am fully supportive of what you are doing.
Actually, I guess I do have one. Ryan, if you're not familiar with form-based code, and I don't know if you are or not, we'd love to talk to you about it sometime because, I think, exactly what you described is exactly what we've been working on for the last 4 or 5 years here in the town of Canandaigua. And I think we're at a spot where you might be interested in learning a little bit more about the area we call Uptown.
I was just reading about it today. I was going to bring it up if you didn't. That's great.
Notes here, Ryan. I'm Shauna, the town planner, to send you the form-based code to take a look at.
That'd be wonderful. I think gentlemen, I haven't had for Maddie had a question too. I just wanted to let you all know.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Just was wondering if this particular building model that you've looked at, have you explored the possibility, I know this is based on rental, but the possibility of looking at a co-op ownership structure and whether or not there's potential for that here as well?
Thank you for asking that. So, one real quick thing here, if you all have just 10 more minutes, there's 2 things I'd love to bring up. One has to do with Canandaigua Uptown. The other has to do with co-ops. How are we doing for time?
You're fine. Go for it.
So first of all, just on Uptown, I can't tell you how appealing a form-based design and a even somewhat master planned area is to a smaller developer. Now, at first you may think, well, okay, do we really want smaller developers in? If they're not well capitalized, are they going to be able to execute? And what's really fascinating is obviously I'm biased that I think smaller developers are fantastic, but don't take my word for it. Community Preservation Corporation has flat out told us that they are focusing on developers who do a project or 2 at a time. And the reason for that is they've seen, frankly, better execution. They've seen organizations that are, perhaps because it is their lifeblood to survive, are paying a little more attention to the details. And so you're less likely to run into especially construction related issues. As long as you have a good architect and project manager involved, a lot of those risks are actually reduced when you have a firm that, frankly, has a lot riding on that particular project, as opposed to, a GC and a developer it's one of 50 projects they're currently doing. And I can then testify as a small developer, going in and seeing a parcel like in the Uptown area of Canandaigua, you know, I've stalked that area since 2015. I actually almost bought the property by the was that or maybe that was on Firehouse, but the point is that you know it's an appealing area. It's close enough, and yet it's big enough that there's a lot of new potential there, and there's roads in and on and on. It's a great opportunity. Going in and as a small developer and just buying a lot and hoping that the zoning process will go well, and hoping there isn't an issue with DPW and service, and hoping that you know you can navigate through you know the public hearing process and everything will go well. That's daunting, and I've said for a long time now, and will continue to say that I think there's an avenue, and it sounds like it's what you're doing, where the towns can say, you know, here's a general master plan, or here's at least the zoning structure that we're going to use that you can apply your project against, and that takes a lot of the risk out. We're going through a process right now that you know we're into month 26 of approvals, and for a small developer, it's a death knell. I mean, it's really challenging to navigate a 2-year approval process. Again, not looking for exemption, not looking saying that we should get a pass, but the more that we can know up front that the project is mapped out, or the process, I'm sorry, is mapped out, and what we need to do to develop something there, and we know we're following that process, and we know there's a predictable time frame, even if it's still subject to public hearing and it isn't 100% at the end, it's still that knowing that process is just a huge value to a smaller developer. So I'm very interested in learning more.
Right. If I could just pause you for a quick second, I think the other thing that we have that's very unique is for Uptown, you mentioned the utilities earlier. We've done the water master plan. We've done the sewer master plan. We actually worked with the county, and Mike Manikowski was very helpful with me with when we actually asked the county to upgrade the force main in terms of the pump station to make sure that that capacity was all there. We know all the lines and the sizes. We have all that documented. We've already engineered all that stuff. And then now the zoning piece is coming. But I think there's even another thing going to exactly what you just said, the smaller developer. In Uptown, we have largely 5 landowners that own the majority of the biggest chunks of Uptown that have said to me, and I've met with every one of them, they've said, we're on this journey with you, even though our expertise is not building a building like what Ryan is showing. And so what they've said to me is, go find me somebody to build the building and I'll work with them and I'll partner with them, whether it's carving off a piece of my parcel or whatever. So I think that makes us very unique, and that we'll be able to help make some of these connections.
That's fantastic. And that is, I have to sometimes resort to pulling Matt Horn away from his child soccer game to find out about land development opportunities. So, no, I'm very interested, and I'll tell you that other, CPC could be a conduit. Again, we're not looking to come in and build something around us as a company. We're a model that CPC is pushing. And so if I go to them and say, look at this opportunity in Canada Uptown, they will actually find developers who are actively looking for sites. And we have, if we have the study area data from you, or you provide to them directly, all of a sudden, all those questions are getting asked and answered up front. And I'm sorry, it was Fire Hall Road that I was looking at one point, not Firehouse Road. So that's wonderful. That's great to know. Just real quickly here on the question about co-ops. I just wrote an article about this, that, everyone looks at housing as a means of building generational wealth. That's a term that's been used a lot. how to take families from all backgrounds and how to provide them generational wealth. And the answer has usually been, well, housing is a great way of doing that. I would argue that that works well for one generation, because inevitably, in order to take advantage of that wealth, let's say home prices go up 50% over the time that the parents own the home. They leave it to the children sell it. Well, the next family coming in isn't going to get that kind of 50% gain. The way housing is right now, they might still get 20%, but the point is it works for one generation. And where we see an opportunity is to take advantage of the efficiency of either row houses or multifamily, and then have the ownership of that building stay local. And co-ops kind of get a bad rap because you think of New York City, you think of high prices, you think of challenges in dealing with a co-op board who maybe isn't being very professional. And one of the things that people smarter than me are looking at in housing is how to do kind of a more regulated or overseen co-op, where you might have someone who rents in a building for 20 years and they've built up access to a certain amount of equity, or a percentage of a certain amount of equity in that building. And that equity could be borrowed against, that equity could be used for education, it could be used for a number of things. But the difference is that the equity doesn't get all cashed out at once when the home sells and then it's gone. Most of it stays in the building and it can be leveraged and used over time. And the problem is that those co-ops, even the benevolent ones, eventually fall into disrepair depending on how well they're managed. And so there's a number of groups looking at having a co-op model where a organization like even CPC would own still a majority of the units, still retain control. They're a much longer lasting, larger organization who can keep those co-ops from falling into any sort of disrepair. But it's a way you can build really efficiently and still perhaps unlock equity for tenants. And you can imagine people who, even if they're paying $1,000 a month, if there's an opportunity to send their kids to college by accessing or leveraging, their accrued share of the building, they're not going to leave that building, and they're also not going to want to see it fall into disrepair because it's part of what their own personal wealth is tied up in. It's kind of a radical kind of concept that sounds like it'd be done only in New York City or something, but it is going to take some creative measures right there like that to kind of bridge the gap between affordable housing, or from housing to what is being built right now, which is multifamily based on economics.
Wow. Lots of information.
Mhm.
Sorry, it's you invite the geek, you're going to get a bunch of.
Okay, so does anyone else have questions for Ryan? I know you're on site today, right, Ryan? You said?
We're I don't know if you can
We
see
can-
here, but we're out there. That's an excavator installing sanitary sewer right now, and a lone single family house behind it. And that's a good example right there. I mean, that house is one of our affordable ones at $350,000.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So if no more,
Don't say that with pride.
you're welcome to sit and attend our meeting, or, you can go back to work or what.
No, I'll hang out. Absolutely.
Karen, I need to move on though. I'm going to have to sign off.
Okay, Mike, thank you so much for coming and supporting us.
Thank you.
So I'm overwhelmed with what I just heard, and especially after what I heard at the town board meeting the other night with the developer who presented there.
Well, that's one piece of it. I mean, the thing
Yes.
is, you know, and I've said this a couple of times this week, form-based code is a game changer. I mean, you
Yes.
think about any of the spots in Uptown and think about what it could look like 5 or 10 years from now. And I tell you, an example I used in the LDC meeting yesterday was the plaza that we've struggled with on 332 for years. I mean, imagine leaving the plaza right there, and it's actually doing pretty well right now, but actually building a whole new building in front of it that includes a 3-story building with 2 floors of residential on top of it. I mean, this really is a game changer, form-based code, and what could happen and what the future looks like for Canandaigua and specifically for Uptown. And, you know, it was very interesting to me listening to Ryan talking about the things that would be ideal of finding a municipality, and I think you go right down the box and check it. So, I mean, if we didn't, let's pretend for a second we hadn't done all that stuff, I would be saying, okay, we gotta do a sewer master plan, we gotta do a water master plan, we gotta change our zoning to achieve the goals of affordable housing that you're talking about. Check, 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 we did it, you know, so we're pretty far ahead of the game, I think.
And in hearing Ryan talk, I agree we are. And part of my dilemma is I immediately want this to be on a larger scale. I want it to be full Ontario County, you know, housing, which I've been talked out of that idea by someone who knows. And then I thought, well, it should be a city and town. But I'm leaning more to thinking perhaps the town of Canandaigua can set an example of how to approach affordable housing and how to get it done and how to help as many people as possible, because a town our size is not able to help everybody. So, you know, we have this MRB proposal and we can get help, and I'm not sure we're ready to look at a way to develop a strategy to use some of the ideas that have been put forward. What do you
Why
think?
don't you tell me about our LDC, but let me just tell you the other great thing about Uptown. He mentioned a destination, right?
Yes,
That's the other thing with Uptown. We're building a new YMCA adjacent to Uptown. We're building the first ever certified fully inclusive playground next to Uptown.
yes,
Mike had to leave, but we have an airport next to Uptown. We have a grocery store next to
Yes.
Uptown. We have all those things that are right there. And we're working on making it more and more walkable. So then the next step is to continue our investment. Infrastructure, man.
This is the big, the big pot. So the state, of course, released its downtown revitalization initiative funding this year. We've traditionally, the city of Canandaigua has applied each of the prior 4 years. They've been a finalist each of the prior 4 years. And they so far haven't been successful. So, you know, when John and I talked early in this process, you know, I said, we got to do something different. We got to do something bold and smart to kind of differentiate ourselves from previous years. And John said, I agree, and I think we should talk to the LDC about it. Well, I just come to understand some of the push and pull with the town board in particular around a lot of attention being paid to the city by the LDC. And so I called Doug to alert him to the notion that you know, we might be having another one of those conversations. And Doug said, funny you should ask, because I've been thinking about developing my own application for Uptown Canandaigua. And now you start to see this nightmare of these two cars like coming towards each other at 100 miles an hour. And so Doug, John, and I sat down and we crafted an application strategy that would seek the $20 million allocation, because this year there's a $20 million tier or opportunity. That would craft a $20 million application that includes the lakefront, downtown proper, and Uptown.
Oh, that's great.
And Doug has suggested, and we're still in application development, but Doug has suggested that a lot of that the focus of the DRI investment be in Uptown be on infrastructure, walkability, transportation, those kinds of things. Because quite frankly, you have the developer interest there. We'll turn the recording off, or don't let Vinny hear the recording, right? So we had a ton of developers, don't just say we got everything, we don't need anything. But we have the developer interest, but the cost to really put it all together on the transportation side, we'll just take them, candidate will get it done. It'll just, the difference between getting it done in 10 years and getting it done in 2 years.
Yes.
Right? And so we're getting pretty excited about the story to tell. We think it's really a neat story. But then B, what it does when we win, what it really does to just accelerate Uptown. And to Ryan's point, now we've got this infrastructure in place,
Yes.
and that's not an added cost, and it's not the revenue, by the way, that gets generated from these units doesn't have to go into catching up infrastructure. It's all there. So it really becomes a net positive on virtually every front to the town. So the LDC approved that approach on yesterday.
And the LDC is paying for it. There's no cost to the town or city if the LDC is doing that.
Yeah.
So the LDC did approve it?
They did,
Great.
yeah.
So what about
we're
the city?
Well, we're all there. The LDC is sponsoring, is paying for both applications, paying for the application for the city and the town to
Mhm.
compete together. It's a layered strategy, right? But yeah, the city is in by virtue of being in with the LDC. So,
Right.
Okay.
You know, a thought that I had about this whole project, and maybe I'm going too quickly on it, but there's an enormous amount of potential that comes in through 332 and the other side roads. And it's my thinking that in what we're going to be doing, whether it's form-based or whatever, is a way to capture that, or, you know, bring that to us. I mean, we're the first ones they're going to see coming into Canandaigua. I love Canandaigua, but, you know.
and that's it. And, Doug picked up on that right away. And in terms of laying out strategic priorities for the LDC, that's in the top couple is really working 332 as the front door
Yes.
to the community.
The gateway.
I know it's not affordable housing, but I'll tell you something that we're all still learning form-based code, right? But one of the roadblocks, literally a roadblock that we've had with a commercial development for reuse of a particular parcel is a subdivision of that parcel, and we were gonna need to extend the road so they had enough road frontage. We were actually talking about extension of a road, Cowan Road out, so that there was enough road frontage to make this subdivision and build this commercial. And I don't know why, but it hit me, and so we'd been communicating with DOT just this past week, and DOT said, no, we're not gonna let you come out to 332 there, we're not gonna let you extend the road there, and we've been talking about it for years, and previously they said yes, and everything else. And it was like somebody just, I don't know, it just dawned on me, all of a sudden, it was like a light bulb went off, it's like, holy cow, with form-based code, I don't care if it's a road. We're gonna drop the building there, we can call it a driveway, eventually it's gonna be a road anyway, but it's a game changer. We don't get burdened by those regulatory
I see
hurdles
that.
that we
Wow.
used to run into.
But on the backside, I used to think, and it was for its day, the PUD approach was innovative. It really, it gave you all this flexibility, but I started to hear it referred to it by the term transactional. And the idea was it's flexible as long as the town board's flexible, right? And so if the town board's ideology shifts or their approach shifts, then the PUD's flexibility ebbs and flows, right? And whereas form-based code is flexible by right? So you come in with all of these options built right into the code.
And the property's already rezoned, the person doesn't have to go through that whole process.
There's no transaction,
Everything.
yeah.
There's nothing, that's already done up front. So you know what, actually, you're told what you can't do. Otherwise,
Mhm.
be creative.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the opposite of what you would normally.
Yeah.
So it's ideal for an organization like Ryan's.
It really
because
is
that's-
ideal for any of this stuff where where you're talking about a market that you're trying to reach, whether you call it affordable housing, whether you call it living wages, whether you call it workforce, whatever you want to call it, where you're trying to keep the construction costs down to make it less expensive for the purchaser. And it's a combination of things. He mentioned row houses. The form-based code would allow row houses. You could do townhomes, you could do apartment buildings, you You get creative. You could have a combination of stuff all attached to each other. It's okay. You know, that's really why I keep saying it's a game changer. You get to be very creative.
And similar to the site that Mike was describing, where the Ryan's new development is, you know, as being central to a bunch of economic engines or employers. Uptown, exact same, right?
That's
You got the
it,
VA, you
exactly
got
it,
the,
yes.
you got Acoustis,
you got Artisan
Pactive,
Meats, Acustos, you got the whole industrial area, the town of Canandaigua is right
All right
across the
there.
street.
you can get on a bike, you can get, you can walk, you can, it's a.
Well, it becomes a community, it becomes a
Right, right.
community,
Oh, for
not
sure.
a development,
Right.
and I think that's,
That's prime workforce development. I mean,
Without that. And it's anchored right smack in the middle, and we designed it that way intentionally. There's recreational facilities being the park is the center that the town owns and we're continuing to invest in, and then you can build all this around it.
mhm.
Can I throw something onto that?
Sure.
And I apologize, I've taken enough time today, but I can't help it. We just had the senior vice president of credit for CPC out here and a VP of construction out here yesterday. And they said that they're losing 20% of their deals at the phase one environmental. And to the point where they just, you know, it's almost like they don't believe there's clean sites left. And part of that's because they're always working downstate. But I think that if you know, I'm looking at the uptown kind of, not I don't want to call it zoning, but it's kind of the intended area, you know, the mix of commercial or where commercial will be loosely, mixed use will be located. I can tell you right now that if you designate that area around the park and had a discussion with CPC and said, you know, we're not holding this open for one lender, but we're going to work with them to kind of identify some specific parcels in that zone, and any developer can come in and they've essentially got a finance entity ready to go, familiar with the site, already screened it environmentally, screened it for utilities, screened it for zoning. I can tell you that they would pull in more people than just us. And that would be a compelling way of really kickstarting things around that park by essentially having the lender doing the soliciting of developers. And it's not going to be always small guys like us. They work with Core Development, for instance, out of Syracuse on a bunch of projects. And I know they would be interested in something like that.
So, taking this a little further, with all the information that we have, and I'm sure that Shauna has, do we put together almost like a playbook? An expanded secret, I mean, just so we know that, you know, as Doug said, all the boxes are checked.
Right.
Now, how do you
Like a prospectus almost.
move this? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the zoning, I mean, realistically, at the September, what would that be, 20th town board meeting, all of these parcels on that map that Ryan just showed will actually all be rezoned. We're actually holding the public hearing and we have the local laws ready to go. The zoning would be 100% done. The form-based code would be adopted. That'll all be done at that September 20th meeting. I even said to the town board, this past Monday, I said, if you have any concerns, please let me know now so we can address them, so we're ready to go. And they all said, we're good, you know, so in terms of the form-based code. So I think that's really ready to move forward. The other thing that we could do, and we've kind of talked about this before, to really kind of take it to that next step, what you're talking about, Sal. We have the sewer, we have the water, we have the zoning done, right? So then what's the next big hurdle? Exactly what Ryan's talking about, the environmental piece and the seeker. We've actually talked about in the past working with the landowners in actually doing approvals associated with the full build out of the site and in doing the seeker. I mean, so imagine if you throw that on top of that. I would think we'll have a line at the door of people ready to come, you know, because I don't know of any other municipality, maybe Ryan, you do, but I don't know of any other municipality that's doing all that stuff. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, we're going to be unique.
Yeah.
So a question that I have then for this committee, this is Nash with Habitat jumping in on the screen. But it sounds like there's great opportunity there in Uptown. How do we ensure that an adequate amount of that future development that's what sounds like will be highly incentivized addresses affordable housing? How do we make sure that those are the developers that are coming in, that it's like Ryan and others that are looking to develop housing that fit the needs of lower income, whether it's individuals or families, rather than more expensive housing units, which there is also a market for. What's the mechanisms that we can lean on here as the committee to do that?
That is a key point, because there is affordable housing and then there's also low income housing, and they're not the same. So what
Well,
is,
and add to that, there's also the market rate, what Nash's are talking about. I know I wouldn't mind living in a unit next to Blue Heron Park. I don't know
oh,
about you
no,
guys,
me
right?
neither, me neither.
So there's gotta be a mixture. It's gotta
Exactly,
be, yeah.
exactly. So how do you incentivize that for developers? That's a question I have.
It's a great question.
I don't know the
I
answer.
don't know the answer to that.
Does MRB know the answer?
Well, I mean, the trick is, so most incentive zoning programs are working to get the developer closer to form-based code.
Right,
So you would be saying incentive zoning, we'll give you added density, we'll give you some relaxed regulation. It's all there, it's all in there, ready to go. So from there, it requires you to either do some cash incentive, right? To say to Ryan, we'll buy down the development cost, we buy the land, we control the property, right? And then we pick the developer we want.
Yeah, let's just talk about that for a quick second, because that is maybe an avenue that this group could work on, because I think of not so much the land next to Blue Heron Park, but I think about what is currently the driving range, right? And I've had a conversation with the gentleman who's buying that, who just bought that. And what he has said to me is the piece that he's interested in is actually the back portion of the parcel. All this other stuff that we're talking about, he's not really interested in developing that pieces. He would like to bring somebody else in, whether the LDC is the landowner, or whether there's some components, or even maybe if we do the build out with a condition on it, for instance, that it has to meet so much percentage of, you know, there's some various ways that we could get into some of that kind of stuff.
So what should we be doing? I mean, we've had informational meetings now, and actually there's a couple of others. Alice is another interesting subject. The New York State Honda Act, I also think, is an interesting subject, because we do have a motel that's for sale down there, and that's in the town, isn't it? Or is it in the town of Hopewell?
Is it town or city?
Which one's for sale?
Say what?
Which,
Across from the Lafayette Restaurant.
Oh, yeah, that's the town. I know which one, I wasn't sure which one we're talking about
Yeah.
first. Yeah, that's available. But the other thing is, keep in mind, and you know, we have our partners that we work very closely with DeMarco also on County Road 10, which also is very much in this livable, workable wage type of housing. There's 2 more phases of 96 units there. The challenge that they've had, and it is very much a environmental, I don't know if it's net zero, I believe it's net zero, but it's very much tied to the energy credits and that sort of thing. They've actually struggled with the financing for this next phase, but there's another site, the approval's already granted outside of the form-based code. Approval's already there. All the utilities are already there. The pump station's already been put in.
Where
the
is that?
sewer, County Road 10.
Oh, County Road 10.
So there's 3 more phases of 96 units, almost another 300 units to be built
And
there.
that's a continuation of what's already there.
Right,
Yeah,
so
those
all
are
they did was
nice.
the first phase, right? So there's 2 more phases of this affordable, livable wage style housing. And then there's a unit, a 96 unit, there's a phase of market rate to be built there with its own clubhouse, its own things and everything else. So there's that piece. I just don't want to forget that. And maybe we have a conversation with our friends over at DeMarco and have them come in and stuff too and talk about some of the challenges. Now,
And they have a
That's- that-
waiting list for the
They do have a
living
waiting
wage
They
units.
do have
I
a
know
waiting
they
list.
do.
So they came in under our mixed use overlay. That's how they were able to do that
Mhm.
project. And they worked very closely with us. We had to get very creative on the utilities to be able to do all that and do any number of different things there to make that work. I think Uptown is gonna streamline this so much more than what they went through, but still, it's already approved. So I know that they wanna move forward with those pieces there. And then over that area, that's a little different. You do have, you've got some grocery stores, obviously you've got Walmart, you've got Lowe's over there. You're not too far from the college. There is the next phase that they do actually requires a sidewalk on County Road 10 to go down to Aldi's and that sort of thing. So there are some connection pieces as we've looked at complete streets over the years and everything associated with that, so.
But we still have to remember, we are a town. We're not a city. And in a town, you expect different community style things. You don't necessarily have sidewalks to get you to everywhere in your mother's house and
Well,
whatever.
That was one of the things that we had a big discussion about with them. And one of the reasons we required that is keep in mind, when you're talking about a livable wage workforce, maybe even, we even had conversations with Pactiv and with RTS about busing people from County Road 10 over to Pactiv and back and forth. Traditionally, what the information we got back is there may be one car in the vehicle. So while the family, somebody may have that car at work, somebody else may still need to walk down to the grocery store or may need to walk to go to the bank or whatever the case. So that was the other big reason why we were pushing for that type of stuff.
In the master plan, that's one reason why we focused on having more bus areas, busing areas to have that availability to people.
So
I was just gonna say, so that came up also, and I don't remember if we ever went back in the form-based code, but I know we had that conversation, and maybe that's something that we have to ask the planning board to do, is as they are looking at projects with form-based code, to have key bus terminal locations as well as solar charging, or charging stations.
Car
for
charging
electric vehicles.
stations, yeah.
And I know Bergman is working on something for us as a standalone document, maybe for that associated with that. But those types of things, we, just make sure that we're including that, because we ran into that with the project over on County Road 10 at Creekview Apartments, where there wasn't necessarily a place for them to wait for the bus. And so then we had to ask the developer to go back in and put that in, even after we had already given them the approval, and they're working with us on that, and they did. There's a community center there. But having that type of stuff, learning from our own experiences and requiring that up front would go a long way.
So
could I just, you had asked a really good question earlier, and I'm sorry I keep jumping in, but I just really fascinating. You said, what I heard two things. One was, kind of how do we perhaps initiate or spur the low to medium income housing, aspect. What Matt said was dead on. So, if you look at, this particular area of Uptown, I'm immediately drawn, first of all, to the park. Doug's got it, you all have exactly right. But Doug said it where, something backing up to that park is going to be a winner all around for both market rate and median income. I do believe you're going to see more and more incentive from the state to have that mixed income. I mentioned that $500,000 per building from NYSERDA. If I don't put LMI units into that building, that incentive is 200,000. So there is a strong incentive to include the LMI. It's been proven that you can mix these incomes in a development and do it well. The answer to how you would get a developer like me to get moving, quickly is you take, you look at this parcel that surrounds the park, our next step as a developer, I might even do this regardless, but, would be to talk to the town about that owner, see if they'd be receptive, if they've had any discussions, reach out to them directly. My next step then would be how to parcel off the piece that I really need. Then making sure that, whatever zoning, or in this case with form-based zoning, knowing I could do what I want to do. those two things right there, site control and some path to a clear zoning approval, that's 75% of what I need to go to CPC. I can build a model off of that. I'm willing to do civil design off of that. I'm willing to start building a financial case on just those two things. And so if the town were to do that, to encourage other people like me to move ahead, even with a single parcel like this, you know, this is a 19-acre parcel, and, you know, be ready to subdivide that in a planned fashion, for multiple developers who would want to go, you know, in on that. I mean, of this 19 acres, you know, I'd be immediately interested in just 3 acres along the edge. You know, that's it. That's 75 units. That gets the ball rolling. You know, those would be mixed income, market rate, and you know, probably 80% LMI units.
Great, and Ryan, you're hitting, I mean, spot on. I mean, that's exactly what we've run into, where, for instance, that property that you're highlighting there, as well as the property to the north of it, are currently owned by the same person, and has up until this point said, cash only, 30 days, net closing, I'm not willing for anything else, you can't do an exploratory. That's a hindrance, right? That's hard to get a developer to come in. And then the property next to that was tied up in a whole variety of different things. And then the property next to that was actually tied up in federal bankruptcy court for 10 years that I've been watching this thing. But we now have a situation where we have somebody who has a passion to and believes in Uptown and the form-based code, that has now put under contract all 4 of those parcels. Has the financial wherewithal to actually pull those together. And then now he can go and talk to Ryan about, for instance, those 3 acres, because now he's willing. So it was, you know, truthfully, I first had my conversation with the gentleman who's got the contract on all 4 parcels now, I think about 3 years ago, and he's been watching. He's been watching the form-based code, and he's been watching everything we've been talking about with Uptown. And to the point where one point I wasn't so sure how serious he was. And he went out and he bought all the office buildings on Parkside Drive. And he's like, I'm serious. And I was like, okay, you got my attention. So, you know, now we've got a situation where he owns the majority of the property right in there. And we can start to work with other developers and other things. And, you know, so there's it's just a fantastic story to tell. There's so much opportunity now. It's all coming together at the same time and everything. So
that's great. Let me know what I can do to help if there's a point where perhaps after the vote or where it's appropriate to sit down. Again, I'm any of my efforts can be applied to other developers. We are open book in what we do. So anything that we put together, we're going to share with CPC, but anyone who inquires. And so, you know, please don't look at us as one developer looking to you know, tie up as much as we can. You know, frankly, you're talking about such a wide-ranging development. There's going to have to be multiple developers, multiple players, and you know, we would be happy to be used as a guinea pig / example, you know, for what's possible in that form-based design.
yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity, and Matt's met with me with this one developer, and then there's another developer also that, Ryan, I think you'd probably be interested in talking to there, that's acquiring, just closed on the other piece of property I'm talking about. So that's also right there, just to the north of it, just a little bit.
One last piece, and I'm sorry, and then I will be done, but we do have access to funds through a group called New York City Energy Efficiency Corporation. They are not-for-profit, another not-for-profit financial institution. They are testing a new program with us where they do pre-development lending for smaller developers for the specific purpose of securing land and getting entitlements. And so in a situation like this, even if you've got someone who's benevolently looking towards the whole scope, they're obviously going to want to get paid. They're obviously going to want to know that developers are serious and can secure that land. And NYSEG provides an avenue for really any developer to do that. They want to see how kind of they're again using us as a test case. They want to see how that goes, but they're looking to make that into a program.
Hey, you're 100% right based on every conversation I've had. I mean, it's like even the gentleman who's now got all this land under contract, he's interested in a particular product, probably towards the back of the property, and maybe spinning off the multifamily units that we've been talking about with you that's closer to the park, you know, so it absolutely is going to be a variety of different players involved in making the whole thing come. I mean, it sounds to me like the work of the Affordable Housing Committee is done.
Well, I think
I'll never be
maybe
done.
we need to take the step of some sort of presentation for the town board. Yeah, I see you nodding your head. And I would look to you for some help with that, but what do you think? What do you guys think? Does that mean that we're disbanded?
Well, I think that, you know, like we talked about today, right, there's a few things that that maybe the group still wants to take a look at, and some of the stuff, some of the projects, how we can help to make sure that those move forward. And Ryan gave us an incredible amount of information today.
Yes, man. Ryan, I cannot thank you enough for what you've brought to the table today. And
And, you know,
if these guys think it was great, you know it was great.
Karen, seriously, maybe one of the action steps for this team is to host meetings, facilitate meetings, so that some of these different landowners, developers start to meet each other and get a better understanding
we?
of our code and our process and how we're gonna help move this forward. And hey, you two might want to talk to each other because you want to do X and you want to do Y, and maybe help bring that stuff together.
I think that's a great idea. How do we do that?
So with an understanding that they have to be willing to build enough units, you know, at a lower price point,
Well, that's, I mean, that's
or they
the-
can't even come to the table.
Yeah, that's the trick. I mean, the earlier question was how do we get more Ryans and less Ryan homes, right? How do we get more Ryan homes and less Ryan homes? And the answer to that is you just got to go get them. You can't leave it to chance. If you leave it to the market, if you put out a call and say, hey, all developers come and meet with us,
Right.
you're gonna.
No, I think you would have to identify some developers
Who's playing in the
that
space.
you've done business with before and have some ideas for potential incentives
Yeah.
to talk amongst themselves about
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's-
I don't know, I mean, I have ideas what the incentives are, but that's really up to you and the LDC.
Well, I think it's also, it has to come through a conversation with the developer.
Right.
Yes.
We gotta,
Yes.
everybody's gonna need something different. We'll look for the themes and then try to package, you know, what we think is the smartest way to do it. But yeah, I would say, you know, Ryan is obviously a clear candidate. Bringing back Andy and thinking about his, you know, some of his nonprofit corporations, not the housing authority proper, but some of the nonprofit corporations. He's got development experience and it's within his mission, Finger Lakes Community Development Corp. But then, you know, at some point, you're gonna have to zero in that spectrum exhibit that I gave you earlier, where it talked about the whole, the whole range of what affordable housing means to different people. You got to pick a point on that spectrum and start working it. And just tell the town board, we think this is the segment of the market that we can make the most impact going first. And I've got an idea, but it doesn't matter because I'm not the town. And if it's workforce housing as an example, then we go to our analysts and say, define workforce housing for us. And workforce housing means we survey the employers in that area, find out what their average wage is, translate that into an annual salary, translate that into an affordability index for housing. Now we've got a price point.
Can we do that for the uptown area?
Yeah, I mean, we can, I mean, there's a couple of different things to look at with that, but yeah, I mean, the, just like what Ryan did, right, the square footage, right? I would argue, and I know, the cost per square foot to build in Uptown is going to be less than it would be to build in the SCR1 zone,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But yet, we have to, exactly what you said, we have at least one member, if not more, on the town board that want us to try to shoehorn a developer into building a $200,000 house on a 1 acre lot in the SCR1, and I don't see how it's possible, okay? I think it's unrealistic. So back to Matt's point, pick a point on the spectrum. If that's gonna be nearly impossible, especially based on what I heard from Ryan today, why not focus on those opportunities where we're gonna make the biggest impact, which is gonna be Uptown?
I agree.
Yes,
And multifamily,
yes.
multifamily
Yeah.
in Uptown is probably.
So which is the, under your owner subsidy
Yeah,
area?
Yeah.
It's interesting because that's one I had the most notes on.
yeah, and that is, I mean, it's the kind of stuff Ryan's talking about, and in every case, it's not owning the land, but it's making the introduction between the developer and the property owner, unknowing just because by virtue of the fact that you're here, what that property owner wants to do with his property, and then, you know, helping Ryan or Andy or anybody else understand what comes next. That information is worth money. That information is an incentive to developers, along with your incredible regulatory framework. So, if once you've picked that point on the spectrum, then we can either do research or we don't have to. But once you pick that point on the spectrum, we just develop some data around what the price points are, and then we ask a developer or, you know, Ryan or someone else, what does this mean to you? What do you need from us to build 500 units at this number? And then we decide, can we make that happen? Do we even need to do anything? You might say, holy, that's manna from heaven. I don't need anything. I just need a place to stick a shovel.
Well, I mean, it's entirely possible, we've already done the heavy lifting.
Exactly.
We just
I
need
think
to
you have.
identify.
I think the work of this committee is really gonna end up being to marry the developer with the landowner. That's gonna be the work of the town.
I see that too.
Karen, I also wanted to say you clued on something. How do you kind of bring people to the table in an encouraging fashion to get the kind of units you're looking for? Don't discount CPC, Community Preservation Corporation's willingness to come to the table as a partner in the whole project. I don't want to speak too much for them, but I hear from them every time. And it's not that you're saying that a developer has to use them, but if they're coming to the table as part of the offering that, hey, we can offer you this New York Green Bank product, but you got to build 51% AMI units as part of it. At a minimum, it gives them an extra incentive, but it also really sets the tone.
Well, and I got really narrow on a definition there, and I want to back up from that. You know, there is the minimum threshold might be workforce housing, but to the degree that, to Ryan's point, the healthiest communities are mixed income communities, that we can also bleed in some of that 50% AMI, some of those 50% AMI units. Ryan's going to need them anyway to get the kind of incentives that we can't even offer, the $300,000 or $200,000 building swing. So some of that will just take care of itself by virtue of working with the right developer and the right product.
Well, should we facilitate CBC, Ryan, DeMarco, Cook, Brasher?
Yeah, have a little
Just
land,
why not have
have
a
a little
meeting?
round table, bring them
Why
all
don't
in
we
here.
bring some developers and the CPC and just have, a roundtable meeting?
I think maybe an opportunity there is, let's get the form-based code approved,
Well,
and then
yeah,
let's
yes.
explain the
Yes.
meeting where we explain what that really means.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And by the way, CPC was the lender on County Road 10.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, okay. Good.
So,
I think it's a great suggestion. Doing that.
so do we
With the
go
form.
to the town board and tell them this is what we're going to do, or do we wait till they take, because that'll be on the agenda for the next town board meeting,
Right,
correct?
that's the biggest thing, I guess I would say, and I think that there's unanimous support for it, to the best of my knowledge, for moving ahead. But keep in mind, it's new, right? So as many people that we can have speak in favor of what this really means and the flexibility that this means, whether it's affordable housing or whatever the case, I think that's good. So maybe
Okay.
that angle for this next town board meeting. And then after that's adopted, then we can say, okay, now that that's adopted, the affordable housing team has identified that area as an opportunity, and now we're gonna facilitate this meeting.
Okay, so
Maybe Ryan would like to.
I am, well, here's the plan. I am more than willing to put something together from my point of view. LDC point of view.
Yeah, it's the 13th.
Ryan,
20th.
would you be interested in putting a very short piece together for the Canandaigua Town Board for their next meeting?
What day is that? Sorry.
When is the town board meeting?
20th of September. At 6
September
o'clock.
20th at 6 o'clock.
And it's a hybrid meeting also. You can do it by Zoom or
Yeah.
in person, but just to talk to maybe from your experience, what you see maybe as some of the benefits of form-based code.
That'd be great.
And I'm sorry, what time?
6 p.m.
Love that.
6 o'clock, yes. We have a plan.
Great.
You got it. Yeah, plan, yeah, if you need anything ahead of time for me to be on the agenda, let me know, or if it's just during public comment. Do that.
Just do it in public.
Okay,
Yeah.
We'll
okay.
have a public hearing, so it'll be,
Yeah, it is a public hearing. How long do you get to talk at a public hearing?
there's no time limit.
So there's no,
Try to
there's
keep it. We don't want to be here till midnight.
I don't know, like 8:30 last Monday night. So a reasonable time limit. That's
Usually 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah,
I'd say.
3 to 5 minutes, right?
This is
That's great.
Yeah.
So we have a plan, yeah,
Yeah.
that's really good. Cool. Thank you, thank
Thank
you,
you.
thank you,
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
We really
Thanks, Zach.
appreciate
See
you
you next
helping
round.
out
Thank
and,
you.
See you in the morning, right?
2 minutes.
I have 2 minutes.
Right.
Yeah, it's soccer.
Great.
They kept mentioning fee simple.
Thank you.
Good to see you all. Thank you all for your work on this.
signing off now.
Uh,